Hi, hello there. Welcome to the horror show. I have one nice one picked out for you today. I'd like to talk to you about Jaws, Jaws. I think there's a lot going on here that seems to be missing the point with people. So I'd like to go into a little bit more detail about anatomy between men and women. So, a couple things first. Next, I'll be covering the history of some of these surgeries they've been up to and how long they've been up to some of these things. But today we'll be talking specifically about the jaws. There's been a lot of controversy, kind of started with that Spanish family and the royals, that big jaw. Jay Leno has that big jaw, lots of big jaws running around. One thing to think about is this. If you saw the show that I did about Bohemian Grove, they're recycling the Bohemian thing and they're calling the old hippie look the boho look for Bohemian. So they do recycle a whole lot of things. And so I've been thinking about Andy and I have been working on the intermarriage and all that amongst the royals. And it's also highly possible that they intermarried to keep the cross-dressing part and hormone use from the rest of us. So, it could be incest, could be not, but let's not rush to that right to this second, okay? Because they write the history. So why would they pen themselves as being such big pedophiles? They had to take down their entire line with inbreeding and all of that. Likely to hide something else because they tend to go for the outrageous. I think that you will conclude from the Bohemian Grove story when really what they're hiding is simple. So that's where a lot of that comes from because that jaw is likely from growth hormones, not from having sex with children. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about some of these growth hormones. They're also referred to as GH. And it's been going on for a very long time because I remember in the 60s, the furniture was shorter back in the 60s and 50s. Tables were shorter, chairs were closer to the ground because we generally had a shorter population. And there was also a big push back then to make the boys get taller. So was that because they were finding the boys were shorter than the girls? They need to correct it with some hormones? Who knows, right? But these growth hormones are kind of interesting, and I don't see that they have a real handle on them. But first, let's talk a little bit about Jackie Kennedy, how this all gets played off in front of us, okay? Kind of an interesting story, the sweet brunette Jack E., who gets taken by the Marilyn Monroe, the blonde hussy, right? Marilyn was born in 1926, supposedly died in 1962. MM, love those 3 threes, right? So the blondes are always kind of the sluts and the brunettes are always the good girls, right? So then there's something about that Andy's been working on as far as the hair and stuff. But Jackie Lee Kennedy Onassis, she was an American socialite, a writer, photographer, and book editor who also served as First Lady of the United States from 1961 to 1963. As a wife of the 35th U.S. president. And this is interesting because the 60s is where we're circling around. A popular first lady, or should I say first man, she endeared the American public with her fashion sense, devotion to her family, and dedication to the historic preservation of the White House. During her lifetime, she was regarded as an international fashion icon. All of our fashions are made for men, you guys. So after graduating with a Bachelor of Arts in French literature, Jackie's from the French side, from George Washington University in 1951, Bouvier started working for the Washington Times-Herald as an inquiring photographer. Yeah, so she just happened to stumble on and meet John Kennedy at a dinner party, okay? And he was elected to Senate that year. They were married September 12, 1953. She's an interesting one because she really set women on a certain kind of pedestal of achievement. Most women in the 50s, like my mom, they were hustling around with kids and stuff and trying to keep this kids clean, everything organized. So Jackie became like something of this statue person that was really unattainable for any real normal woman, right? And it all starts with trying to get the men to lust for other men because if men thought Jackie was attractive, they were essentially lusting after another man, right? So at age 31, she was the third youngest First Lady of the United States. So He had the poor funeral. She ran around that pink suit with the so-called blood on it. I thought that was a nice touch when she was supposedly crawling on the back of that car when he supposedly got shot in the head, and she got blood all over the front of her pink suit. These people are really something else. I'm telling you, when you know who they are, it makes their stories they've made up even more incredible. So even after her death, she ranks as one of the most popular and recognizable first ladies. Jackie also got the Eternal Flame, sign of Lucifer. Her grave is right next to JFK's. Jackie died of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Interesting disease. Now, keep in mind, I'm certainly not a medical professional, luckily, but a lot of these diseases these people are dying from seem to be self-inflicted wounds. But I'll be talking about that in a few days. But this non-Hodgkin lymphoma, you can look in the show notes. I've got pictures of Jackie's jaws and all of that. And I've also got pictures of some show notes about the famous singers to show their jaws. But yeah, they get a lot of things in that jaw, that particular part of the jaw area. And I'm not sure that it has anything to do with anything other than hormone usage. But like I said, I'm not a medical professional. But jaws are a big deal in American culture. As a matter of fact, I wanted to have a jaw implant. If you want to look at what an old lady jaw looks like, look at episode 142. I'd like you to go look at that. So then that will solve all of your mystery questions as far as why no graphics. Yeah, 142, women have a different jaw than men, okay? Women have a very narrow, small jawline. We have a much smaller dental arch than men. We have smaller lips typically than men. We don't have the big bones in those apple cheekbones. Women don't have those. We tend to have narrow, closer set eyes, but it's the sum total of things, okay? So there's such a thing with square jaws that I didn't go out shopping for plastic surgeons or anything, but for I don't know, a lot of years, I kind of thought maybe someday I'd like to have my chin done because we've been so influenced by chins and this stuff in the media. Well, they're starting to look like a freak show, but because there's this important significance of square jaws in advertising. They sell us more with people with square jaws, evidently. So eyeglass companies, it's almost a mandatory requirement for this kind of product as to feature models with heavy square facial structures. Why? Because strongly structured faces look much better with object ornament like glasses. Well, I think I look okay in glasses too, but see, they're trying to push us toward that big jawline look, okay? And how do they get that jaw? Well, they have to take, but we're going to talk today just about the MTFs, which is the male to the females. So all the pictures you see on the show notes for today, and I also did a special section for you to show you the lovely women or men singing duos of the 50s and 60s, who were all men wearing wigs. So you can start taking a look at those jaws, okay? So what they have been doing is defining that jaw as beauty for the rest of us, okay? So I guess real women. And then why do we wonder girls have all this body dysmorphia? Well, they're never going to get that jaw, are they? They're never going to, men have longer necks than women. So you look around at group pictures, you'll see all the women have the long necks and the men have the short necks. Not how it's supposed to be, folks. Now, I have seen some younger flip kids, flip boys with the longer necks. But in general, if you look at a group shot of people, if all the women have the long necks and the men have the short necks, zoom in a lot closer because that's where you're starting to see the big changes there. So how do they get those? This growth hormone business is interesting because they either take estrogen or testosterone. Let's keep it simple, okay? So the ones on your picture, like Jackie Kennedy, was a man who wanted to become a woman. So she would have been given estrogen, but they're also given growth hormones. I don't think they have a real good handle on the growth hormones for what I could tell. Because if you look at through the 40s and 50s, they were all very short, okay? I think these people in general, these gypsies, are just probably shorter as a culture, probably more around that 5'3", the short Jewish priest short kind of people. That's who I think they are. And that's why I think they were trying to get everybody to take these growth hormones. So when you take the growth hormones, it makes them thicker along the cartilage surrounding the bones. So, like if you were to take testosterone, like Jackie Kennedy was to take testosterone, which she had to have taken, right? Or excuse me, estrogen, it would have softened some of that. So you got to figure that she had a pretty solid square jaw to start with. So it can tighten and make it a little bit stand out a little bit more, but real women just do not have that kind of a jawline to begin with. It just doesn't happen. That's why when you see these older men like Mitch McConnell and them, they get that turtle-like neck. That's more of a female type neck. So if you see the trans women like Nancy Pelosi, she's still got a little bit of a longer neck even at 80 because she's a man. So yeah, you can tell a lot from the neck size. So as close as I can tell about that jaw with that the family in HAPSBURG, I think in the very early days, way back then, this experimentation with the hormones was limited to the royal families, probably because of experimentation and probably because of expense. So I think they were the ones that got going with the initial hormone treatments. And I think they introduced the growth hormones to not very good results. And here's why. What can happen is you can get this condition called acromegaly. It's ACROMEGALY. It's a condition where they get an overproduction of growth hormones, and it's almost due to a benign tumor or a gland. So the symptoms include a pronounced jaw and forehead, as well as hands and feet growing out of proportions. So that's where some of these freaks, likely like Carly Simon, Jay Leno, that's where they're not getting it from the genes from their family line. They're getting it from the hormones. For example, a friend showed me Jay Leno's parents. He did not get that jaw from his parents, but they really weren't his parents. You know what I mean? See how complicated this can get? So anyways, I don't think the chin is a hereditary factor is the bottom line here. But I'm not a doctor. But it's just one thing to look at, okay? Because there's a lot of questions as far as this growth hormone because a lot of athletes are using it. And somebody said the condition is chronic and the amount of growth hormone produced is profound. So you can't get that big chin and stuff by dosing yourself with a bunch of growth hormones. So even if you're doing it, inject a ton over the course of years, you can't really have any noticeable change. So what this leads me to believe, this person's comment, is that this is being introduced at a very early age, this growth hormone. Why do I say that? Well, because of the line of people who have those jaws. They're all connected, okay? You got J.K. Rowling's. They're all connected at the top, right? And this also explains why they have those out of control big feet and hands. So I think it has to do with the growth hormones. So basically, I don't see that they have the growth hormones really totally under control, if you ask me, because why all these short populations are we finding? You know, why are they growing some of these freaks? You know, why are these high level people like Leno and them ending up with these horrible jaws? So in conclusion, the HAPSBURG deal from Spain was a cover story for their early hormone use. That's just our opinion from looking at this stuff. You certainly are welcome to your opinion. We certainly would like to hear about it in the comments. So bottom line is, if you're taking estrogen and also taking growth hormones, you're likely going to get those big feet and stuff, okay? Another place I found for growth hormones is this. A lot of IVF is going on in this deal, okay? So IVF, they're using growth hormone in vitro fertilization. See, we got hormones buzzing all over the place here, right? So this leads me to believe that possibly people like Leno and them got growth hormones in vitro, went a little bit nuts, and they didn't find out until after they were born, right? Or maybe exactly right after birth. But I think it happened right about that early conception time, okay? Because it says before starting an in vitro fertilization cycle, some women need to help to ovulate, and the use of growth hormone therapy may help these women. This aims to reduce the use of gonadotropin therapy to stimulate ovulation, a hormone that can cause multiple pregnancy. So yeah, I think it's the growth hormones is what I think it is. I think the original hormone makes their bones probably thicker and stuff and increase in size, but I think it's probably pretty close to when the time that they're being born. Can't come up with anything else because I'll be talking next about all the diseases and stuff they're giving themselves. So there's something up with this stuff. And I think a lot of it then becomes fundraising, because then they go out and try to raise money from us. They scare us that we're going to get these diseases, and probably chance they're pretty slim. We're probably not going to. But, we've been undergoing a mass DNA restructuring for all of us. So let's not kid ourselves. Okay. Look at your own family photos and stuff. This stuff's been going on. So we'll get to that in a bit with the rest of these countries and stuff. But they have been directing us towards a transhuman and all of that for a very specific reason. It has been a mass DNA experiment across the entire globe. Okay. And we're picking it up from the 40s and stuff. But I will be talking in a day or so as far as where we trace these original surgeries, how we think all that started going, how far back were they doing some of these surgeries, what were they doing, early castration, how were they changing the body around early days. So anyways, yeah, it's getting pretty interesting. I don't know. You have to look at it very logically, because otherwise this really is horror show stuff, right? I mean, who would have dreamed that they'd be over there cooking up all this stuff with our DNA? And some other interesting things going on with this ancestry stuff, because a guy that I'd lost track of, that Andy found him. I found him, and she found him again. And he was the head guy for the New York Times. And he's now in charge of Ancestry.com, which is a very interesting place we're looking into, because it's privately owned out of Utah. Huge database of DNA and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot going on, a lot to get our heads around. So I hope you'll join me in the comments. It's hard to work and avoid if we don't know what your thoughts are. So yeah, I don't know any of this stuff until I start looking. So if you have any questions, please ask. If you had any input, please add it to us so we can help keep going here. So be safe out there, and I'll chat with you in the comments real soon. Goodbye for now.